Hello landlords, it's Ernie Garcia, landlord attorney, and today we're talking all about tenant damage on rental property. What can you do about it? What can you do to prevent it? What can you do once it's already happened and the tenant is long gone? Talking all about tenant damage. Let's get started. So pretty often I hear from landlords who are terrified that their tenants are going to destroy their property on the way out. There's some kind of problem and now the landlord has sent a notice to vacate or maybe even gone and instituted an eviction against this tenant, and the tenant has said, "You want me out? Fine, but I'm going to tear this place apart." And yes, sometimes this kind of vandalism will occur, but for the most part, tenants don't do this. The real problems are the tenants who have done incremental damage to a property over the course of months or even years. Those tend to be the most significant damages that most landlords have to deal with. What could a landlord have done differently along the way to have prevented so much loss? Many of these issues most landlords don't actually consider, not at the beginning of the lease. These are things that pop up in the middle of the lease or maybe at the end after the tenant has already gone. Maybe it's the way they've maintained the yard or things they've planted into the yard that were not well kept and now are causing you problems. Maybe there are pests like ants or roaches or termites that came on. Who was supposed to deal with that? Landlord? Tenant? All you know is now you've got a house that is infested. And what about little fixtures? Some tenants like to come in and change out ceiling fans or faucets. They like to change out light switches and make the place a little more personalized. They don't tell you anything about it. And when they're gone, they either take their stuff with them or leave their things behind that really don't fit with what you plan to deliver to your new tenants. So now you've got costs in changing everything back. What could you have done differently? So today I want to talk to you about the way you should consider your tenancy and the expectations you should have going into the whole thing. You should prevent it, you should correct it, you should repair it, and ultimately you should forget it. So to prevent significant tenant damage, you're going to want to have a plan in place before that tenant ever takes the keys to your property, before they ever move in a single piece of furniture. You've already decided that the tenant is not going to make the final call when it comes to this property. And that means that your lease should probably have a clause in it that says something to the following effects: you do nothing to alter this property without my express consent in writing from me. And by emphasizing these things in your lease, you're the most likely to be able to point to a tenant and say, look, you're currently in breach because you didn't follow this segment of the lease. In fact, in a good lease, the landlord will undertake all repairs, because the moment you say, all right, tenant, you broke X, you fix X, and we're cool. The problem with this as a solution is that the tenant may fix things in a way that you just don't like, or they may take it upon themselves to fix other things without you knowing because they're covering those costs. And in their mind, they're improving the property, but when it comes down to it, they've diminished the value of your home because they've done something that you just don't like, or they've used a quality that doesn't really mesh with your property, and in the end, they've actually caused you harm. So by taking that right off the table, right from the start, you prevent a tenant from causing harm when maybe they think they're doing something good. Any alteration to the premises should come through you, and your lease should make that crystal clear. Now, just because you put it down in writing doesn't mean that's enough. I always tell landlords that it's a good idea to have the talk with your tenants at the time of lease signing. Don't hand over those keys and don't put your name on a document until you've sat down and kind of run through your expectations, particularly as it comes to damage on the property. What happens if the tenant wants to put in a ceiling fan that you just don't like, or they say, I'll pay for it and I'll have my guy do it? This is when you step in and you explain what your procedure is for this kind of thing. But if you don't know it, again, previous segment, you've come up with a plan beforehand. So now, because you do know precisely what you would do in this situation, during the talk, you're going to share that with your tenant. Along with the how do you get stuff done, you're going to want to share with them what happens if they do it incorrectly. If they cross that line in the sand, you're going to let them know that you have a plan in place to issue a notice of default and to undertake repairs and to send them a bill for costs. And by letting them know ahead of time that this is your strategy, they're less likely to get it wrong. In fact, they may appreciate the fact that you've explained this to them so that whenever it comes to the point where they request some kind of alteration, even one they're willing to pay for, they go through you and you make it happen so that your property is in the best shape possible. Finally, just to make sure that things are happening precisely the way you intend for them to happen, you're going to want to inspect on a regular basis. Now, generally speaking, what I advocate is for 2 visits during a 12-month term. So after 3 months and after 9 months, you've stepped onto the property just to see how things are going along. You're checking the plumbing and the ceiling and the floors, the walls. You're checking outside. You're checking inside, air filters, sinks. You're checking the toilet. All the common things that are going to break down over time are the common things that tenants sometimes tinker with, and you're going to make sure that everything's still in perfectly good working order. You're also going to make sure that the tenant hasn't modified the unit in any way that you know has already been prohibited. By being on the property at least twice during a calendar year, you're the most likely to prevent problems before they ever begin. If you're enjoying today's content, we always appreciate one of these. So if you have to correct something that has gone wrong, remember, you've already got a plan in place. When your tenant violates your lease, you're going to want to start instituting that plan and not take it lightly. First off, if there is a problem, some damage caused by the tenant, maybe it's their pet and they've scratched up the back door, or maybe they've dug a giant hole in the backyard, or they've chewed up one of the stairs, you're going to want to address it quickly, and sooner is always cheaper than later. Get it fixed fast and then talk to the tenant about this. So along with talking, you're also going to do a little bit of writing. And you're going to issue a notice of default to your tenant who has violated the lease by damaging the property. Don't hold back and say, well, I'm going to let this one slide. What you should do every single time is when you go in and you find that property has been damaged, you're going to want to take care of it. You're going to want to correct it, but you're also going to want to correct whatever the cause was. So it's not enough just to get things fixed. You want to make sure it doesn't happen again. And hopefully by issuing a notice of default to your tenant, you're putting them on notice that such a thing could eventually lead to an eviction. Even if rent is paid, the fact is they're not allowed to destroy your property. And by causing you harm in this way and having you go in and use up your time to fix things that they damaged, they're kind of laying the foundation for a good eviction lawsuit against them. So hopefully by issuing that notice of default, it's not going to happen again. And so the last part of correction is the bill. How much does it cost to actually get this repair done? Whatever your cost, whether you do it yourself or whether you've got somebody else who does it, you're going to want to pass that along to your tenant. Now, you may have a feature in your lease that says, by the way, you agree that if I have to come in and do any kind of repair, you agree to pay me at $20, $30, $40 per hour for my work. Personally, I'm not very handy, but if you are, and these are things that you do, you got to understand, just like they do, that your time has value. And if you two have come to an agreement in the lease, what that costs in terms of dollars per hour, then you can recover that amount in a bill that you issue to your tenant after that repair has been completed. Additionally, if you hired somebody and they charged you a set amount, that bill should be sent to your tenant and you should give them a reasonable amount of time, about a week, to pay it. If they don't, problems, and that's probably going to require another notice of default. Now you might be asking, do I always repair it? And I'm always going to tell you yes. It's never a good idea to leave your home in disrepair, even in the following situation. You've got a tenant who's just been trouble, and you're evicting them anyway. I would still say it's a good practice for you always to keep your house in good repair. In fact, if you are evicting your tenant and you've got photographs of the damage they've caused to the property, that might be part of your case against them. Additionally, you're going to want to get that repair completed so that they don't use this against you. So one thing you're going to want to prevent is the tenant using the repair issue as a defense for non-payment of rent. Now, in the state of Texas and in many states, repair issues are not generally a defense to non-payment. But whether it is or not, that tenant's going to bring it up. And in some situations, the court's going to listen, and it might sway their opinion as to whether or not an eviction should be issued. And so the way you're going to sidestep this argument is by every single time completing that repair. And so you don't give them an inch when it comes to your right to evict them. You want to take away the argument, oh my gosh, he never made this repair and we were left in squalor. Don't even give them the opportunity to make this argument. You get a repair request, you get in and take care of it. Or if you know that the house is in disrepair, you get in there and make sure that it's taken care of, and you photograph everything so that you're able to show the court, not only did I go in while they were not paying rent, but I did everything in my power to make sure that that house was always in tip-top shape. You always want to be able to show up to the court and be able to say, my hands totally clean and my house is in great condition. And one of the biggest reasons to do this is you want to be able every single time, even if that tenant is in the middle of an eviction or it's after an eviction and they've left, you want to be able every single time to issue a good working order home to your next tenant. Don't feel comfortable sending something in poor condition down the river to the next tenant and saying, you know what, I'm done. I'm sick of pumping money into this. I'm going to continue to lease this house, but if they want to take care of it, they're going to take it as is. Always, 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 you want to deliver to your next tenant quality, quality, quality. If that means a repainting or it means a quick repair, get it done and then move along. Finally, in situations where the issue has escalated to the point that they just stop paying anything and they'd rather take the eviction than ever pay you another nickel, you're just going to have to forget it and move on. You're going to need to invest the money to get the house back up into good working order. And you've probably invested time and money to get rid of a tenant like this. But you know what? If they were never going to pay and they don't have the capacity to pay even after you've secured your judgment, you're just going to want to forget it. You're just going to want to move on. Don't stew about it. If you got to, go vent somewhere, but understand that, you know, going after a bad tenant like this and sinking more time and more energy and more money into trying to get something that's never ever going to happen is not good for your soul, not good for your heart, not good for your head. You're better off just forgetting about it. Get the stuff fixed, move on to the next tenant. Another thing for you to consider is the fact that you shouldn't beat yourself up about having picked a bad tenant in the first place. It's going to happen from time to time, even if you went through a thorough screening process. Stuff sometimes goes sideways, and it turns out that that tenant who you thought was a great tenant, who on paper looked perfectly fine, just went right off the deep end, and now you've incurred a huge loss that you just can't collect. It's okay. Be able to forgive yourself, be able to shake it off and say, I made a mistake. And maybe it was a screening error. Maybe it turns out you didn't screen quite as well as you could have, or there were red flags in that application that you really should have paid more attention to. These things happen, and you're going to learn from this. So along with forgetting about the thing that happened and forgetting about the fact that you're just not going to be able to collect your losses from this particular tenant, you're going to want to forget about this failure, but remember what happened so that you learn from it and it makes you a better landlord. You know, each of these steps along your journey is going to make you a little sharper, a little keener-eyed. You're going to view applications a little bit harder, but you're going to know what to look for, you're going to know what to ask, and you're going to know what to anticipate from your future tenants. So yeah, we want to forget about the money loss. You want to forget about the damage that was caused, but you want to remember what you learned from this experience. Now, hopefully you can catch all of these things before they ever turn into trouble, but that's not always going to happen. As you do this more and more, you're going to get better and better at this process, preventing it, correcting it, repairing it, and then just forgetting about it when there's nothing else that can be done. Among the things that you can do to make things better, of course, you can screen better, you can purchase insurance, you can stay on top of things as best you can, but every once in a while things are just going to go wrong. But by being ahead of the game and adding to your knowledge base every single time something does go wrong, it's going to make you a better landlord because you're going to learn from it. To learn even more about the landlording process, YouTube seems to think that this video right here is the best thing that you can watch. Go ahead and watch it and all the rest of the content of this channel. We appreciate you joining us, and until next time, landlords, happy leasing.